Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Let me just take this opportunity because I see lots of faces perhaps unfamiliar to this place to say a little bit about it and a little bit about the series of which Natasha is a part, and then we will have Natasha's presentation. So welcome everyone to the Social Scientists Association, and we are an organization that has been engaged in research, in publishing, as well as participating in larger national debates. So you might wonder why the Social Scientists Association is hosting this particular talk. Well, so for that I just need to take you back a couple of decades. So this organization was set up in 1977, and quite soon after it was set up in the wake of big changes that were taking place in Sri Lanka, political changes, but also economic changes. And one of those changes was about the entry of private capital or foreign capital into different sectors of the economy. So in the early 80s, the SSA began a research project to investigate how these changes that were taking place, of course also globally, were beginning to manifest themselves in rural regions, where, remember, to this day, the majority of our people live. So for the Social Scientists Association, trying to understand what is happening there, of course not in isolation, but in relation also to developments in the urban or urbanized areas, and in relation to larger trends, is important for us to have some sort of grasp on the reality or the realities of our people and the reality of our society, its structures, its social relations, and its processes. So we are not. Our primary interest is not so much to do with issues of crop production or yield or disease and pestilence, or all of these are, but to understand specifically the relationship of those who live in rural areas to the resources that are around them. Those resources can be land, they can be forest, they can be fish, they can be water, and so on. And to understand the relationship with each other, because everybody is not the same, everybody is not doing the same thing, everybody does not enjoy the same power. So this series, what we have called the Critical Agrarian Studies Seminar, is an attempt from the beginning of last year. This is the first in 2024, but the 11th since it began early last year, to put some of these questions once again on a political as well as scholarly agenda. To ask those questions of what is happening there, to ask what our relationship is to that, and to ask many questions. Right? These are not only questions about how people live, but these are also questions about how they think and act, how politics unfolds, right? How they are politically active too. So we're delighted to have with us today Natasha van Hoff. Natasha has been an activist for many years, including, but not only, in this area. Her interests include other parts of this island and also other sectors and groups within it. But we were delighted to learn of Natasha's ongoing research as part of her postgraduate work, and we were very keen to try to learn from Natasha how she is now thinking, analyzing, grappling, conceptualizing what she has seen in relation then to perhaps what she's also reading and thinking and observing elsewhere. So without further ado, Natasha, we are delighted to have you with us. You will speak to us for about 45 minutes. You will have some slides, but quite rightly you have decided that not everything you say needs to be represented on a slide, which means that we have to listen to you and also to speak, to move between English and Sinhala. And therefore this is also an invitation in the discussion that will follow for everyone to please also feel free to use those languages, and even Tamil too, with the assistance of friends. We will find ways to try to understand each other.
Thank you, Kumar. A very good evening to everyone, and a big thank you to SSA for giving me this opportunity. This is quite new to me. To start off, as Kumar said, I'll be talking in both Sinhala and English. I think it will be more of things that I feel like I'm more comfortable in explaining in Sinhala. Deeply, I'll go into Sinhala, but I'll generally speak in English. So I've been working in the land rights field for around 4.5 to 5 years now, particularly with the Law and Society Trust, with the People's Alliance for Right to Land. And a lot of people here have been part of that. Marissa, Ruki, we have Nihal, so many activists here. So I invite them to also add anything that I might miss out, because these are people I've learned from throughout the past years. So to start off, before I go into Rideemaliyadda, I would like to talk about land rights, particularly in Sri Lanka. And to start it off, I would like to talk about defining land rights. In general terms, when you do, for example, if you do a Google search, you'll see as land rights as right to occupy and also the right to enjoy land and resources. But when you go into more indigenous land rights definition, there you see them talking about right to occupy and use, but in a more individually and as a community. So there you see the word community or communal land use and land access is talked about. But FAO in their definition for land tenure says the relationship, whether legally or customarily, defined between people as individuals or groups with respect to land. So there you see the word customary use again. So there's two components of land rights that I would like to, that I feel is very crucial. One is access to land or resources, and also use of land or resources. With these two aspects, something that we need to understand is land rights does not exist in a vacuum. It's interconnected with a majority of other rights that we have. For example, indigenous land rights or indigenous rights, environmental rights, even gender equality when it comes to women's access to land and right to women's land rights. Also things like right to food, right to livelihood. So land is not mere a property. It's more connected to the social aspects of community. And this is important to understand because what I've seen in my work, and I think many of you all will agree, that if you ask someone what is land rights, someone in suburban Colombo in the urban setting would say, oh, someone who has a deed, someone who has a permit. But in a post-colonial plus post-war country like Sri Lanka, land rights is not defined merely by having a deed or a permit. It goes beyond that. It goes into generational land use. It goes into customarily land use, like land use as community, so communal access to commons. So there is this, we as people first need to understand that aspect of land rights, that land rights cannot be defined with the legality of a paper. Land rights goes beyond, specifically for rural communities. So within my research also I touch on to that, where people define their access to land through saying things like, අපේ සීයලත් මේ ඉඩමේ වගා කරා. අපි මේව පාරවල් පාවිච්චි කරා. අපි මේ ගම් යූරු වලින් වතුර ගත්තා. So our grand forefathers have used these lands. We have cultivated these lands for generations. We have used these streams to get water. We have gone through these lands to do our things for generational and generations. So, and also in Sri Lanka, you get a variety of laws and legislatures, right? So we have the Vihara Gamdewala Panatha, which gives, which yet is like, for example, when we work in Monragala, specifically in the Palwadda sugarcane plantation area, and trying to get those people to have some formal identification of permits. A problem we came across was the Dalada Pansala in Kandy has lands in Monragala that comes under their purview. So, and then there is this problem where people have cultivated these lands for generations, which is under the Viharagahandewala Panatha. But now there are companies coming in and offering temples, different kind of telling them, oh, we'll give us this land, we'll cultivate it, we'll give you so and so. And the temples are willing to give it, but they completely ignore this whole community that has been dependent on this land for generations and generations. So understanding that is very crucial to understand how land issues and everything comes to play. Because if we don't walk beyond that understanding that land rights is not merely having a deed or a permit, we cannot be sensitive to the land problems that are in Sri Lanka. So I like to take you back to a report we did a couple of years ago that Marissa, Nihal, all of us was a part of. It was called the People's Land Commission Report. It was done by the People's Alliance to Right to Land. And it was a commission that went around Sri Lanka asking people about land, also solutions they saw, solutions they identified. So a set of commissioners, 12 commissioners, we did multiple visits around Sri Lanka to which came up with this report, which is a really good report. It's available online on the PARL website. So there we kind of defined land rights in Sri Lanka according to a few 4 categories. One was dispossession. So dispossession meaning was when communities are disposed of their lands. It can be due to militarization in the north and east, where communities are disposed of their land. It can be the Malay Makkal community who do not have an ownership to land at all currently. And also then the next thing was deprivation of livelihood and social security. With major corporations coming in, new development coming in, a lot of people are losing this aspect of livelihood firsthand. With that, they lose social security. Livelihood that is crucial for them is taken away without prior consultations of communities. And that was one way we kind of identified land struggles in Sri Lanka. And then again, we have environmental degradation. When you talk about environmental degradation, it's important to understand, or something that I think most of people who work in the land rights field would know or have understood that communities do understand the importance of the environment they live in. They do understand that they live or they are in an ecosystem and they are dependent on it. And therefore, they do understand that the degradation that happens to the environment that is around them does affect them. When I be talking about Rideemaliyadda, I will talk about that also, where they do talk about things like people cutting trees. They do understand how important this is for their livelihood. It might be because they will lose their livelihood, but they do have that understanding that it's important. So environmental degradation, even though it does not in surface look like it would affect people living, like people's houses or so on, does affect the livelihood aspect, because livelihood is strongly interconnected with land. And then diminished identity. Social identity is strongly connected to land as well. A farmer's identity comes with his cultivation land. A fisherman's identity comes with the sea. So in instances where his access to the sea is blocked, for example, we had cases where tourism projects that comes in the south and the east are completely ignoring the small scale fisher, what do you call those? Dīvara තොටුපොළවල් වහලා හොටෙල් ගහනවා. එතනදී කොහොමද මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ජන ජීවිතය තුළ ඒගොල්ලන්ට දීවර කටයුතු ඉදිරියට කරගෙන යන්න නැවතුනාම ඒගොල්ලන් දීවරයෙක් හැටියට ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ තියෙන අනන්‍යතාවය කොච්චර දුරට බලපානවද. We also saw it in Pallimune. We see it in Mullikula, where fisher communities, when you lose your access to the sea, when your access to the sea is cut off, be it from a tourist project, be it from a military camp, so on, you're losing your identity as a fisherman. You are losing your livelihood, but you are also losing your identity. And it's crucial also because there is components of ethnic and social identity that is also lost because there is specifically in the north, where militarization has affected this social identity people have, the ethnic identity people have. So in essence, Sri Lanka has this vastly different forms of land rights issues. We have the Malayaha community in the Central Highlands and in Gal and Matala that do not have ownership at all, so landless communities. We have disposed communities in the north, and even in Puttlam with the dispossession that happened in 1990 and so on. Then we have people that are dispossessed because development projects, agriculture projects, major projects that are disposing people from their livelihoods and also from their houses, homes. Then we have also dispossession happening in urban Colombo, where communities are removed from their places of housing that they've been here for a long time. Colombo has had these people have been living in Colombo for generations, but they are now shoved into skyscrapers. So there is various forms of land rights issues. We also have issues of access to commons. We have cattle breeders in Batiklo, who are in a struggle to find pasture land for their cattle. We have the same issue happening in Mana, in places like Papamude. And we also have issues of environmental declarations happening, which do not take into account communities that have been accessing those lands for generations. We see it in Ampara happening. We see it in Lahugala. We see it in Mana, where a lot of these declarations happen ignoring people's connections to land, ignoring people's livelihoods. And so environmental declarations, like for example, when they declare a nature reserve, when they declare a forest and so on. There are instances, Kumar, where for Lahugala, for Viditaltiv Nature Reserve in Mannar, where declarations had happened post-war using Google Maps or using drones. So completely ignoring communities, they have not been connected, they don't know. And even after 7 years since the Viditaltiv Nature Reserve was declared in Mannar, people yet don't know that the land that is right behind their house belongs to a nature reserve. So things like that. So there is this variety of issues, and clearly you can't give a cookie cutter answer for all these land issues. There should be a bottom-up process where people's voices are heard. For example, we do have this thing called involuntary resettlement policy. The involuntary resettlement policy is for development projects where communities have to be resettled. And there is this huge list of due diligence that the state and the companies need to do, which includes talking to people, getting them into the process and so on. We have an EIA process which has people's voices involved, components involved. But how much of an extent does those things happen? So we have this problem of, we do have a variety of land issues. We cannot bring in one kind of answer for all of this. But at the same time, we as what I see as someone who has been doing advocacy and campaigning, I think Marie would agree, advocating and campaigning for specific land issues have been like kind of the best option for seeing, different land issues. For example, to add to something I told right before, so we have the LRC lands in Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa. Oh, sorry. LRC is Land Reform Commission, and under the Land Reform Commission is many of the lands that are under irrigation projects like the Mahavalley and so on. So there are, under the LRC, there is a set of laws that govern what you can do with the land, how you can give it to another person, and so on and so forth. And so initially, before 2022, women were not given equal right to ownership under the LRC. But now that was amended. But then there was this clause added where now you can sell an LRC land without getting the permission of the Pradeshi Sabha and so on. Oh, sorry, LDO. I'm really sorry. Yes. So I'm confused now. Okay. Sorry, it was not LRC, LDO. So that's the Land Development Ordinance. So under the Land Development Ordinance, there is this set of laws which was quite, which till 2022 did not deprived daughters of land ownership, essentially. But then when they made that change, which many of us campaigned for, they added this thing where now you can sell or not sell, you can mortgage your land without the official permission from the authorities, which was not there. In a context in current Sri Lanka, this happened in 2022. Mind you, there was this whole organic fertilizer thing happening also. So in a context where people are in indebtedness, there's an economic crisis going on. And in 2022, a lot of people were not cultivating their land. That gave in for, various companies to come in and, acquire land and so on. So that kind of, this legislature also, the way it turns depends on specificity. So for LGO lands, that is a problem we see. But when it comes to Maleha Makkal community in the Central Highlands, in the plantation sector, who do not have any form of land, providing them with අපි කියන සින්නක්කර ඉඩම් අයිතියක් ලබා දීම තමයි වැදගත්. නමුත් ඒක අනුරාධපුරේ පොළොන්නරුව කියන දිස්ත්‍රික්ක වලට වැඩ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ මෙතඩ් එක හරියන්නේ නැහැ. ඉතින් අපි ඉඩම් අයිතියට පිළිතුරු සපයන්න යනකොට දෙන නොයෙකුත් ක්‍රමවේද තනින් තැනට මාරු වෙන්න ඕනේ. අපි දැන් ගොඩක් අය කියපු දෙයක් තමයි LDO වෙනස වෙද්දී වෙනස වෙලා මොන්ඩාල් එක LST එක වගේ අය අපි මේ උකස් කිරීම කියන තිබ්බ මේ ලයින් එක වෙනස් වුණාම අපි මේකට එරෙහි වුණාම ගොඩක් අය තියෙනවා ඕගලන් සින්නක්කර ඉඩම් දෙන එකටත් අකමැතිද? නමුත් සින්නක්කර ඉඩම් අයිතිය ලබා දීමත් එක්ක මොනවාද බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ? මොකක්ද ඒක පිටිපස්සේ තියෙන්නේ කියන එක ගැන හැම වෙලාවෙම ඔළුවේ මතක තියාගන්න දිය යුතු දෙයක්. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කියන්නේ නැහැ දැන් උතුරේ කැම්ප් වල ඉන්න මිනිස්සුන්ට උතුරේ මේ නැතන් මධ්‍යම කඳුකරේ ඉන්න මලෙහ ජනතාවට සින්නක්කර ඉඩම් ලබා දිය යුතුයි. ඒකට කියන්නේ හැම එකටම බේසිස් එකක් තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඉඩම් ප්‍රශ්නෙට පිළිතුරු සැපීමේදී මේ දේවල් ගැන දැනුවත් වීම සහ ඒ අනුකූලව පිළිතුරු ලබා ගන්න අවශ්‍ය කරන ඇඩ්වොකසි එක කැම්පේනින් එක කරන එක තමයි වැදගත් වෙන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒකත් එක්කම මම රිදීමාලියද්ද ගැන එන්න. Can I stop for any questions in the middle or no? No, it's fine. It's fine. No.
What is this?
රිදීමාලියද්ද ගැන කතා කරද්දී මම කොහොමද රිදීමාලියද්ද කියන මේ අරගලයට කොහොමද මං ඇතුල් වෙන්නේ හැම පොඩ්ඩක් විස්තර කිව්වොත් 2022 බිබිලේ රිදීමාලියද්ද අරගලයේ ලොකුම ප්‍රොටෙස්ට් එක බිබිලේ සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඒකත් එක්ක තමයි මං ඉස්සල්ලාම මේ බිබිලේ ප්‍රොටෙස්ට් එකේ පිටුර. ඒකත් එක්ක තමයි මම රිදීමාලියද්ද අරගලය පිළිබඳව දැනුවත් වෙන්නේ සහ ඒ දේවල් වලට යොමු වෙන්නේ. I think I need to talk in English. Sorry. Yeah. So, no, I'll just explain. So, Rideemaliyadda is a village in the Uva province, in the Badulla district. In the Badulla district, it's between Mahiyanganaya and Bibile. And so the Rideemaliyadda farmers' struggle is a struggle against a sugar corporation. In 2006 was the first time the sugar corporation idea comes into Sri Lanka, where they hope to acquire 65,000 hectares of land for a sugarcane project. Mind you, Uva province has multiple sugarcane projects. Palvatta, for example. So they come in 2006 and so they coming. So then, when in 2006 the international company was Gasel Ventures that came into Sri Lanka, the foreign investor, and it initially has discussions in Colombo, then goes into provincial discussions with provincial authorities in the Uva, proposing this idea of a sugarcane project, which is 65,000 hectares of land. And initially in 2006, the people aren't aware of whatever is happening. But the opposition, one of the opposition MPs then was Samantha Widyarathna, who was JVP MP then, which is now NPP, and he's also from Rideemaliyadda. This is his constitution, his village. So he kind of starts digging into it and gets together with the Bibile temple to initially have a chat, kind of understand what the project is going to be. And they had, and the company actually approached him also. And they kind of had discussions themselves, like opposition MPs, not like the national opposition MPs, more like, provincial level opposition MPs, and then the temples and so on. And then in 2007, they first initiated this Uva Vellasa Surakime Janata Sansada. which is like a collective they formed in order to spread awareness and try to have discussions with majority of the people they can, and try to get this, essentially what they wanted to do from the beginning till now is to stop the project coming into their lands. So, so then they begin with this whole awareness building, and they started having rallies in Polonnaru, in Bibile, in Rideemaliyadda, in Mahayangana. And actually 1 year since the project came in, it halted for the first time. And then it stops for a couple of years, like 2 years, and in 2010, they come again and approach temples first. So they approach temples in the way, like, these villages are very cut off from, towns and so on. It's very rural. To give you a little bit of idea of the geography, this 65,000 hectares of land, which is to be taken from the Rideemaliyadda area, is not only Rideemaliyadda. It stretches to the borders of Ampara district. It stretches to the borders of Batticaloa. It stretches to the borders of Bibile and so on. But this is extreme rural areas. Majority of these communities are chaina cultivators. So they cultivate their whole lands for one season, and the next season they cultivate half of their lands through waters from streams and so on. The rest they cultivate from rainwater. So what they did, what the investors did, was they approached the temples in the area and gave them Lankabel phones, because there was no phone connectivity. Their first, kind of bribe was a Lankabel phone to the people. Then they had this whole big dana in temples, and first got the temples to kind of agree with their project. It was only the Bibile Loku Hamuduruwo who, what do you call Apavat? What's Apavat in English? It was the then Bibile Loku Hamuduruwo and the other Hamuduruwo from the temple that was against, but the other smaller temples in the area supported the project. And then in 2014, the divisional secretariat of Mahayangana actually transferred the ownership of the land without informing people or anything to the Mahaweli Authority. So that gives Mahaweli Authority the legality to do as they wish, essentially. And then in 2015, the company approaches the village again and tries to put on, lay boundary stones, and in that instance also, there is a very communication barrier. Like, people were not told what was going on. Like, they come to do surveys without telling people what is happening. They will come to their surveys, අපි මේ ඉඩම් බෙදන්න ඕගලන් ඉඩම් අයින්නාවා, අපි දැන් අර කම්පැනි එන්නේ නැහනේ, අපි මේ ඉඩම් අනින්න එනවා කියලා ඇවිල්ලා මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ඉඩම් අනගෙන යනවා ෆැක්ටරියට. මේ හැබැයි කියන්නේ මිනිස්සුන්ට අපි ඉඩම් දෙන්න මනිනවා කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ හරි මේ ට්‍රාන්ස්පරන්සි කියන එක නිල් එකෙත් නිල්ම නිල්. මේ මිනිස්සු ඒ කියන්නේ හොඳම දේ කියන්නේ මිනිස්සු සමහරක් වෙලාවට ඩිවිෂනල් සෙක්‍රටේරියට් එකට ගියාම 2014 කලින් ඒගොල්ලන් දන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් මොකද in 1989 there was actually a mapping done under a president commission, but because of the riots and everything they didn't process it. So මිනිස්සුන්ට ඇත්තටම ඩීඩ් එකක්වත් මොනවත් හම්බුන්නේ නැහැ. හැබැයි මැපින් එකක් දාලා ගල් මෙහෙකයි ඔයගෙටම මේකයි ඔයගෙටම මේකයි ඔයගෙටම කියලා පෙන්නලා තියෙනවා. But there is no records of that even. So when it came to that aspect of proving your ownership to land for the Rideemaliyadda people, දිගටම කිව්ව දෙයක් තමයි 89 අපේ තාත්තලාට මේ ඉඩම් බෙදලා දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒගොල්ලන් දැන් අපි මුල අවස්ථාවේදී ගිහලා කිව්වමත් කියන්නේ ඉඩම් බෙදලා දීලා ලියලා දීලා තියෙන්නේ. but ඇත්තටම document එකක් එතන නැහැ ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ. ඉතින් just like that, so 2015 comes, Then 2017 was kind of a very crucial year. This is actually the second investor. Gazelle Ventures came in 2006. They gave up and they left. This is the second investor, who was a Chinese investor under the Yahapalne government. And they bring the bulldozer. People sit in front of the bulldozer, doesn't let it go through. They throw rock pellets at the factory office and so on during 2017. And something crucial there was the factory was supposed to be in a land area of 149 hectares. This 149 hectares was in the villages of Dehigama and Agrarian. This is extreme rural in between Bibile and Padiyatalawa road. These are two villages there. Internally also from there, you have to turn around, you have to go, very internal land. And what happened was, they had invited the then President Maithripala Sirisena to do an inauguration of the factory, to lay the in stone. And what the people did was, they said, and it was on World Environmental Day, very ironic. On World Environmental Day, they are starting a factory that acquires 65,000 hectares of land, which will acquire land that is under which has an elephant corridor, which has archaeological sites, which has indigenous land that is under Ratugala, the Ratugala Adivasi community, and so on. And they are trying to inaugurate it on Environmental Day. And what the community and the movement did was, they said, api me gas mahana karana. Api medata gas mahana karana. And they published it so much that the factory had to stop the inaugurational ceremony. And the community, together with 60 odd monks, had this whole gas mahana kirime program. How can I call it in Sinhala? A tree ordaining ceremony where they ordained the picture on down here, where they literally put in robes around trees. And when I questioned them and was like, "Ayy ogalan me wage deyak kare, egolan kiyen deyak tama අපි සිංහල බෞද්ධ ප්‍රජාවක් හැටියට අපි හාමුදුරුවෙක්ට හාමුදුරුවන් කෙනෙක්ට අත තියන්නේ නැහැ. ගස් මහන කරන එකෙන් උත් අපි කියන්නේ ඕගලන්ට බෑ මේ ගස් වලට අත තියන්න. ඕගලන්ට මේ ගස් කපන්න බෑ කියන අර්ථය තමයි ඒගොල්ලන් දෙන්න උත්සාහයක් දරුවේ. And in selecting these trees, they made sure that they selected the oldest one, which has a big width and so on. Mind you, they know about their trees, their streams, everything so well. Something we completely ignore when we talk about development projects and agriculture projects is, we ignore the knowledge that the community has. The community does know, මේ උල්පත වැහුවොතින් මෙන්න මේ හෙක්ටයාර ගානක්ම හිඳෙනවා කියන එක දැනුම community එකට තියෙනවා. ඒ දැනුම factory එකට නැහැ. So a plan of the factory was also to put in bore wells to get water. And community's biggest resistance was for that. හැම හෙක්ටයාර් දෙකකටම එක බෝවෙල් එක ගානේ දාන්න තමයි plan කරලා තිබ්බේ factory එක වතුර ගන්න. කිව්වා මුළු district එකෙම මුළු province එකේම තියෙන වතුර හිඳෙන තරම් නලලින් දාන්න මොකද්ද මේ project එකේ ඇති හොඳේ? මොකද්ද හොඳේ? එච්චර තරම් වතුර පුරා ගන්න තරම් project එකක් මෙහෙට ගෙනමු. This is a මේ කාෂ්ඨක ප්‍රදේශයක්. මේ කියන්නේ අවුරුද්දේ යම් කාලයකට විතරක් වහින ප්‍රදේශයක්. ඉතින් ඒ වගේ ප්‍රදේශයකට මේ වගේ ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එකක් ගේනදී ලොකු ප්‍රශ්න සංඛ්‍යාවක් කමියුනිටි එකේ ඒ දැනුම තිබ්බා. ඒගොල්ලන්ට කියන්නේ අපි හැම වෙලාවෙම කියන දේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඕවර්සී කරන දෙයක් තමයි මේ කමියුනිටි නොලෙජ් කියන ඇස්පෙක්ට් එක. So I'm just jumping a little bit, please ignore. So ඊට පස්සේ okay, yeah. එතකම in the same year they do this petition, which is a blood petition and a sangha petition. ඒගොල්ලන් ඒක කොළඹට දෙන්න එන්නෙත් මේ දෝලාවක දාගෙන. දෝලාවක හින්දවලා තමයි මේ පෙටිෂන් එක ගෙනල්ලා දෙන්නේ. ප්‍රෙසිඩන්ට් ගෙනල්ලා දෙන්නේ. then එතනින් මේ ප්‍රොජෙක්ට් එක එතනින් ඒ ඉන්වෙස්ටර් යනවා. In 2007 that investor also retrieved. And in 2020 we get the bulldozer coming for the second time. In that time also women, specifically women, sit in front of the bulldozer and does not let the bulldozer come in. And then in 2022 was the last, the most tense year in recent history, where the Mahaweli authority came with the bulldozer for the third time and came with a fiscal order to remove the people from their lands. And this was, mind you, about 2 weeks before before they were supposed to cut their crops. And in Dehigama village, they completely destroyed crops that were supposed to be harvested in 2 weeks. Corn, ගොඩාක් ඉඩම් එහෙම් පිටින්ම බුල්ඩෝසර් කරගෙන ගියා. සති දෙකයි තිබ්බේ මේ ඉඩම් වලින් තමන්ගේ වගාව ගලව ගන්න. එක්තරා ඒ වෙලාවේ දෙහිගමේ හිටපු ඇන්ටි කෙනෙක් කතා කරලා කියනවා මම හඬා වැළපිලා මහත්තයාලගේ කකුලෙන් අල්ලගෙන ඇඬුවා. මට සති දෙකක් දෙන්න. මම මේ බඩිරිගු කරල් ටික මං ගලවනකම් මට වෙලාව දෙන්න. ඒ කිසි දෙයක් ගණන් ගන්නේ නැතුව 2022 බුල්ඩෝසර් එක ඇවිල්ලා දෙහිගම ගම්මානේ එහෙම් පිටිම සුද්ධ කරනවා. But the other side they were not able to because the resistance were more strong. They knew that they were coming and so on. And but they put in a boundary fence. And but within like 1 month, the community decides to forcibly remove that fence. They actually in the dawn gets together from all 4 sides of the boundary fence, and this is when they were removing the boundary fence. They totally removed the boundary fence that was put up by the factory. So a few things like resistance things that I kind of found through my study was initially, as I said, there was a lot of awareness and all of that. Then you have collective actions of resistance, which is things like protest and rallies and all of that. Then we see little by little there is like more confrontational aspects of resistance, where they would sit in front of bulldozers, they would remove fences, they would throw rock pellets at the officers and all of that. But you see that change happening. These things were not happening in 2006 to 2015. It was after that. And මගේ රිසර්ච් එකේ මම අන්තිමේදී මිනිස්සුන්ව හම්බුනාම කිව්ව දෙයක් තමයි අපි මීට වඩා දේවල් කරන්න ලෑස්ති. අපේ ඉඩම් වලට අපි මීට වඩා දේවල් කරන්න ලෑස්ති කියන එක. Then you get day-to-day forms of resistance. Day-to-day forms of resistance was things like now I told you they were, yes. So when it comes to day-to-day forms of resistance, as I said, there were chain cultivators who would cultivate things like badirigo and cultivators who cultivated things like corn, things like maize, and what is that a jati in English? See, it's grains and so on. And but now they kind of cultivate more permanent crops. They have started cultivating coconut. They've started cultivating rambutan. Different thing. That is also a form of resistance. That's to show the metrical. So far, they came and they destroyed our lands because they don't recognize we have cultivated in these lands. Because they come on off season, they don't see our crops. But we are going to cultivate permanent crops, so they can see. Now there is always a few families who stay in these lands 24/7. They don't come back home. There is actually 2 sisters and a mother whose father was ill for a long time and just passed away, I think last month. And when the bulldozer came in 2022 and broke and destroyed all their lands, it also destroyed their hut. And their hut was on a tree because, mind you, there is an elephant corridor next by. Their hut was destroyed and it was on the ground. And those 3 ladies lived in that hut for about 3 months till they could repair it. 3 ladies in a open land which is right next to an elephant corridor. Because they recognize that another thing, I'll give this English translation. අපි මේ ඉඩම 24 පැය නැති නිසා තමයි මේගොල්ලන් ඇවිල්ලා අපි ඉඩමින් අයින් කරන්නේ. So since we don't occupy, or since we are not in this land 24/7, that's why they are removing us from the land. So we have to be here 24/7. So those forms of resistance. And when there are people, as many movements we've seen, we see villagers who are supportive of the factory. And when they talk to these villagers also, there is this small words they use. අපි අපේ සටන අතාරින්නේ. ඕගලන්ට ඔය කියන කිසිම දෙයක් හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ. We will not stop our fight. You will not get what you all are going to get from the factory and so on. So these forms of everyday resistance. Then also, as I said, community has community knowledge, and in their resistance, they do put out things like what they want out of it. Egulan කියනවා, I'll give the English translation also. එගොල්ලන් කියනවා මේ ඉඩමේ උක්වගා කරන්න සුදුසු ඉඩම් නෙවෙයි. මේවල මේ භෝග වගා කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේ කාලවට මේ භෝග වගා කරන්න පුළුවන්. මේ භෝගවලින් මේ වගේ ප්‍රතිලාභ ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන් කියන එකත් ඒගොල්ලන් පෙන්නනවා. Like they do bring out outcomes and say these are the variety of other things we can grow. That is way more profitable than having sugarcane. So they do give alternatives in their resistance. And so that's kind of mine. Also, just to highlight something, this is from the Uwavella Saragalaya. Oh, shoots. Sorry. So this poster on the bottom, you can see it is one of those Uwavella Saragalaya Satankaru. So they do refer to that also a lot.
Just explain.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So they would talk about this is a land that there was a historical fight in. So we are ready. We have those blood in us. So this resistance is going to be as strong as that is. So they do refer to it. They have memorabilia attached to it in their posters, in their leaflets, and so on. So
we're talking about 1880.
Yes.
Talking about anti-British.
Yes, the anti-British, anti-colonization resistance that happened back in the day. They do refer to that also. They refer to it as in a way of, pride. They say, ඒගොල්ලන් කියන්නේ තමයි අපි අපේ නහරවල දුවන්නේ ලේ. It's a sense of pride and, a way that they gain strength in their resistance. And something important I saw was this change in movement strategy. If you go into the timeline, there are some years that barely nothing happens. This I understood is because this movement is very connected with livelihood. When there is no direct threat to people cultivating in the land, they don't actively protest, they don't actively resist. Because for them, livelihood is what is important. සිංහලෙන් කියනවා මම දැන් සිංහලෙන් කිව්වොත් ඊට වඩා ගැම්මක් තියෙයි. කියන්නේ මේ අරගලය ඇතුලේ ලොකු අරගලේ කියන්නේ අරගලේ තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම ජීවන අරගලයක් යනවා. මට මේ ඉඩම කියන්නේ මේ ඉඩමේ ගොවිතැනෙන් එන ගොවිතැන් කරන්න මට හැකියාව තියෙන තාක්කල් මම ගොවිතැන් කරනවා. මම පාරේ උද්ඝෝෂණ කරන්න යන්නේ නැහැ. මේ ඉඩම මගේ ජීවනෝපායත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධයි. ජීවනෝපාය කියන්නේ මගේ ජීවන අරගලයත් එක්ක සම්බන්ධයි. I think so something that that connects to the second point want to highlight was the formulation of the movement actors. The movement for Rideemaliyadda consists of community, consists of indigenous community like the Ratugala Adivasi community particularly, also the clergy and Samanth Vidyaratna and a few of the opposition MPs, not MPs, politicians. And that formulation is key when it comes to the previous aspect I spoke about. The people like Samanth Vidyaratna, people like the Bibile Lokuhamuduru, keep an eye on what is happening in times where the factory does not come into the land. When the factory does not come in with a bulldozer and try to put the farmers out, the farmers will go on cultivating their lands, whereas these people have this, do keep an alert of all these things. And something that was interesting was these two villages that would be first acquired for the factory is rural, and you have to turn from a main road to go in. And the person who cultivates that first plot of land always keeps an eye on every vehicle that comes in. So our first visit, we went in a KDH van, and Namal, who is one of the biggest community leaders, got a call saying, "Alupata van ekak aawa, kawuda danne." So that communication, his land is, nothing's going to happen to his land. It's people inside, but that kind of understanding that we need to be on alert, we need to always keep an eye on everything that happens, is sad, but at the same time happening in this form of a resistance movement. And you expect it not to be there in 16 years. You expect 16 years is a long time for people to, resist a company. And in an instance where some villagers like it, many villagers don't, that whole fight to keep it on. But yet the community, when the actual factory comes in, they do come in front. The women particularly are amazing. Yes, in meetings and things, they do play a role where when I asked them in the whole ordaining ceremony, what was your role? අපි තමයි කෑමෙන්නේ. අපි වත්තේ තියෙන අලවලින් මේක හැදුවා අර හැදුවා. අපි ගමේ කන කෑම තමයි හැදුවේ. Things like that. They say their role is yeah. So when I ask women, what did you do for the ordaining ceremony? What was your role? They will say, oh, we made food, and we made food that we eat in the village. Things like that. But actually, when I dig deep, they would say, we were the first ones who laid in front of the bulldozer. When they came in, English, what is ini in Sinhala? Poles that you put in for the boundary wall. When the lorry came with the poles, it was women ini. Poles, eh? Sticks, more like boundary sticks. They would say, we were the first ones who stopped the lorry and got the driver to get off and took all the sticks out of the lorry and put it down, and things like this. And so there is, women who are very forward in the movement as well. But this whole variety of actors play a crucial role specifically here. But we also see in land rights movements, there is also civil society here as well, environmental activists and so on. We also see where sometimes these other actors kind of override the actual community that is affected. Sometimes community is so dependent into a fact that it's no longer a community struggle, it's more like a CSO activist struggle, unfortunately. But here you see community has a very crucial role in it. And community is constantly in a resistance with their very, very small forms of resistance. And that was very key. And the innate connection this community has with the land. There is an elephant corridor next by that will be destroyed for the project. And in their something I asked, because I do work a little bit on conservation now, also was what do you do to protect the environment? They would say we don't even go through the elephant corridor. We only go if it's only if there is no other way. We don't use the elephant corridor at all. We we do this thing where we cut a fire belt. Guinea patiyak gahanawa කියලා සිංහලෙන් කියන්නේ, where they leave a portion of grassland as a barrier when they actually before harvest, before cultivating, when they put fire and clear the land, they do the inivatiya or the fire belt thing. They do not lay a hand on the streams. They don't cut trees around. What is ulpat again? I forgot. Springs, sorry. They don't cut trees around springs and things like that. If you go to the land, this is Uva province. Again, it's very hot. You do see a lot of open lands, but there is like pockets of trees somewhere, and there's a spring there. So things like that is because they do understand that if these springs dry up, it's our livelihood that gets affected. If we destroy the elephant corridor, elephants will come. There is elephants always in the elephant corridor in the evenings, and there is no harm to the land. It's only rarely, once in a time, that you see elephants invading. That's because these are traditional pathways elephants have taken, and that has left as it is. Hence, the elephants do not divert into these into these lands and so on. So it's that community connection to land. Some might think harima what do you call it? Can be very selfish of them, like their kind of protection of environment and everything is mainly because of their livelihood. But that is also because they do have that understanding of that whole ecosystem, that just having the land without the elephant corridor, without the streams, will have no use going into the future. So that is something I kind of understood with my study for Rideemaliyadda.